Coming up with the state meets right around the corner, it's time to see if the early season frontrunners are still at the head of the pack. Alex Heinert will unveil our second and final high school track and field coaches poll.
A pair of Division I recruits have helped Sioux Falls Lincoln emerge as one of the favorites in Class A baseball. We'll introduce you to the Patriots' talented twosome.
All that plus a baseball playoff preview and another Platinum update. Varsity Sports starts right now. And hello and welcome to Varsity Sports alongside Jason Andera. I am Jay Elson. Well, Jason, it is a fun time for spring sports teams. The high school playoffs, of course, underway in South Dakota high school baseball right now, while area track and field athletes are closing in on their respective state meets.
Well, we're going to start off with some track and field, and Alex Heinert is here with an update.
Hey, thanks, guys. Well, this past weekend, the track world in the upper Midwest was drawn to Vermilion and Sioux Falls, but unfortunately, not for high school track reasons. But even though conference meets for the Summit League and the Northern Sun might have taken center stage, the high school track season slows down for no one. To get you caught up on what did go down on the high school side of things, let's run down the top headlines from around the region, starting with the 2016 Girls Classic at Fargo South. The West Fargo throwers continued their dominance with 6 top 3 finishes, including wins from Keely Moulton in the shots and Keely Walker with a new platinum mark in the discus. Another strong performance on the track from Fargo Davies. They carried the Eagles to a comfortable 72.5-point team win over the same EDC competition they're going to see at Regions this weekend. Out west at the Radke-Orvik Classic in Minot, Century rolled to a team win over a mix of WDA and EDC schools, with the hometown Magi taking second and Red River finishing third. The Patriots' depth in the field was the difference, with Lucas Meyer, Max Cook, and Levi Rocky all earning individual crowns in the high jump, long jump, and discus, respectively. In South Dakota, the ESD conference meet in Harrisburg gave us a little more drama than expected. Brandon Valley's girls had to come back from a 42-point deficit to overtake Yankton for their third straight ESD title. Watertown won the boys' title by 54 points, thanks in large part to three relay wins and a sprints sweep from Mason Herricks in the 1 and the 2. Individually, another big day from Courtney Dowling, who won the 100 and set meet records in the 2 and the 4, while Brandon Valley's Jacob Hanna picked up 3 wins of his own in the mile, the half, and the 2 mile. Finally, at the Black Hills Conference meet in Custer on Friday, no surprise to see St. Thomas More win the girls' team title for the second year running, but it was a bit of an upset for Spearfish to beat the STM boys for the team victory on that side of things. The big news, the performance of Custer's Tori Glazier. Despite the snowy conditions, that's what I said, snowy conditions out west, the sophomore won the 800 on her home track with a new platinum time of 2:14.18, a new PR for the 3-time state 800-meter champ. Speaking of platinum, let's look now at the updated platinum leaderboard, and there is Glazier moving Courtney Dowling out of the top spot in the half by 0.5 of a second. No other new names on this week, although Dowling does lower her leading 400 time by a full second, that 55.57 mark, the 6th fastest all time now in South Dakota. In the field, I already mentioned our only change this week, Keely Walker of West Fargo. She goes 139.3 in the discus at Fargo South to displace Lincoln's Izzy Van Veldhuizen for the time being, at least. For the boys' track, I told you Mason Herricks had a good Saturday at the ESD conference meet, right? Well, it was not just good, platinum good. The Arrow senior takes over Hunter Johnson's spot atop the 200 standings in platinum record time and ties Sam Clark for the top spot in the 100. He'll be the favorite in both of those events at the state meet next week. A couple of changes in the field, both coming from Minot. Levi Rocky gets on the board for the first time this season by overtaking Century teammate Boston Svahovic by 2 inches in the discus, while Devon Pope betters his triple jump mark from the Dakota Relays by 1/4 of an inch at the Radke-Orvik Classic. Hey, 1/4 of an inch, but a PR is still a PR, right, guys?
Absolutely. That's why it's called a PR. We've never done it
Not
before.
for platinum, a personal record.
Personal record. All right, well, as teams start their push toward their respective state meets, it's time to take another look at who the coaches think everyone else is going to be chasing. We'll have the latest edition of the high school track and field coaches poll right after this.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Mitchell Technical Institute, Shields, and Farmers Union Insurance Agency.
And welcome back to Varsity Sports, and we welcome back Alex Heinert to this part of the set for more high school track and field talk, starting with the reveal of the second track and field coaches poll of the season. This is kind of an exciting deal. Again, like we explained just a month ago, this is the first ever.
Yeah, I agree with you. If you recall, back in April, like we talked about, we pulled the coaches from the biggest classes in North and South Dakota to rank how they think the team standings of their respective state meets are going to end up. And with state just a week and a half away, which was ridiculous, we thought it would be a perfect time to check back in.
Yeah, well, it's time to reveal the results, starting with the only class to feature a change at the top, and that is the AA girls in South Dakota.
How opinions have changed in just a few short weeks, right? Brandon Valley was the favorite and Rapid City Stevens a close second back in April, but both have been overtaken by the upstarts from Sioux Falls Lincoln. The Pats were a distant third in our inaugural poll, but a Metro Conference title win over the Lynx and good showings across the board at the Dakota Relays have the coaches narrowly picking the Patriots this time around. Brandon and Stevens both moved down a spot, while Yankton and Rapid City Central trade spots at the 4 and the 5. The Gazelles riding high after a really nice runner-up finish at the ESD conference meet last week.
All right, so it's Lincoln on top on the girls' side. How about the AA boys?
Well, no surprise here and no change at the top. The Patriots retain their top ranking to make it a clean sweep for LHS in South Dakota, and they do so in pretty convincing fashion. Lincoln had a 6-point lead over then second-ranked Roosevelt in our first poll. They've more than doubled that advantage over now second-ranked Watertown this time around. Good for the Arrows, by the way. They move all the way up from 5th to 2nd after their ESD title this past weekend. They are trending upward, along with Stevens, who moved from 4th to 3rd. Roosevelt and Washington both shift down a couple of spots.
Maybe Mason Herrick's having a little bit
Maybe
to do with that.
A little
surge
something. A little something with that. Garrett Dieterman, those guys are stepping up big.
All right, to Class 8 in North Dakota now. And unlike in South Dakota, there wasn't nearly as much movement this time around, especially in the boys' side.
Yeah, more like zero movement. Other than West Fargo dropping out of the receiving votes category, this list is exactly the same as it was in April. Century led Bismarck by 8 points back then for the top spot. They lead by 9 this time around. Red River remains kind of a distant third with Legacy and Minot rounding out the top 5. And similar story on the girls' side. This was a tight vote at the top back in April with only 1 point separating Century from Davies. Even tighter this time around as the two are now tied at the top of the standings in points. Though Century does get the number 1 ranking, they earn 2 more first place votes than the Eagles. Expect that title race in Class A to be really close. Yeah. We had a tie for 4th as well. Red River moving into a tie with West Fargo after the Rough Riders were unranked in our first poll.
All right, well, good stuff there. For more on our poll results and other track-related topics, let's step back into the acceleration zone now. And Alex, what is our time frame for today?
I think a brisk Tori Glazier 800 meters sounds about right. Let's go with a 2:14 on the clock.
All right, sounds good to me. The gun is up. And we are off with the votes now accounted for. What surprised you most about our latest coaches poll?
You know, to me, I think the way the AA girls vote shook out is a bit of a shocker. I'm not totally surprised that Lincoln overtook Brandon. They've been great this season. But the Pats doubled up the Lynx on first place votes and didn't receive a single vote lower than second place. This team was third by a long distance entering the season. And according to the coaches, they're now the new favorites in AA.
All right, well, let's get your take on it. We've heard from the coaches. Are they the favorites in your opinion?
Ask me about that next week.
Okay.
Give me a little more time on that.
All right. Any other thoughts on the poll then?
You know, I think the South Dakota coaches were really paying attention at the Dakota Relays. Watertown and Stevens both showed their worth at Howard Wood. That success gets vindicated with the number 2 and number 3 ranking respectively. And then in North Dakota, the fact that nothing has really changed either means the coaches were just spot on the first time, or it just might be a little harder to get a good feel across that state for who really is on top of each class.
All right, well, we're going to find out in a week and a half just how close those poll results end up being to the final standings at those state meets. We'll get a little taste, at least, in North Dakota this weekend. What are you watching for at the WDA and EDC region meets?
Well, in terms of state title relevance, I think individual performances mean more than who actually wins the WDA in Dickinson Friday and the EDC in West Fargo Saturday. These region meets can mean a lot, but don't read too much into the team standings. If I recall, Bismarck crushed Century at last year's region meet, and then it was obviously a very different story at state the following week.
Sure. Well, okay, good to know there, so pay attention to that. With the season nearly over, though, give us your thoughts on how this season has stacked up against those of years past?
I think it stacks up pretty well. I mean, so far we've not had any all-time records broken like we did last year, but we've had a ton of top 10 all-time performances in both states this season. In North Dakota, Kylie Bergentine, Akili Moten, and Carly Ackley move into the top 3 in the triple, the shot, and the 2 mile. That's top 3 all-time. Plus Hunter Lucas and Sam Clausenser had top 10 3,200-meter times in the same race this year. And then in South Dakota, Courtney Dowling had the number 3 200 time and 2 top 6 400 times so far. Plus Zach Anderson moved into a tie for 4th all-time in the high jump. Jasmine Cooper and Kendra Dykstra each cracked the top 10 in the mile, and Sam Clark possibly tied the all-time 100 record, depending on what the Coaches Association decides. I think it's a pretty good indication of the level of quality in what hasn't exactly been a nice spring to do track and field.
That's fair, and I think that is a good way to sum it up for you. Well, we didn't make the time quite, so it doesn't matter. At this point, I'm going to ask you one last question because I got to know, where in the heck has your cousin Alan been this spring?
He's been busy up in North Dakota. He'll be back here next week, though.
Outstanding.
We have got an interstate medley competition to renew, and so he'll be back in studio.
Breaking news right there. All right, good stuff, Alex. Thank you for that. Sioux Falls Lincoln has been one of the favorites in Class A baseball all season, thanks in large part to the play of this talented tandem. Jason's going to introduce us to the Patriots pair of D1 recruits after this.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Mitchell Technical Institute, Shields, and Farmers Union Insurance Agency.
Welcome back. The Lincoln Patriots baseball team finished the regular season at 18-1. Now, you don't get that many wins in a season without a complete team effort, but there are 2 future Division I prospects that had a lot to do with the team's success. It's nice to have the top player at any position in high school baseball. Well, the Patriots, they might have the best pitcher and catcher in the state. Nolan Burchell totes a 0.56 ERA and a 5-0 record at the top of the Lincoln pitching staff, while Griffin Lockwood Powell is the most feared defensive catcher in the class, and oh, by the way, he's hitting at a .559 clip with 4 homers this season. The 2 are leaders on a team full of talent.
Well, I can't say enough for our seniors that we do have this year. With Nolan and Griff in particular, in the huddles, getting guys focused. It's been something they've been doing even as sophomores.
In the 6 years they've been playing together, Griffin and Nolan have developed great chemistry on the field.
I think that we both know each other pretty well. I mean, he knows what I'm going to throw, what I want to throw, and in what situations. I mean, he's a general. I mean, I don't really have to worry about runners too much, which helps me out a lot, making me focus on the pitch instead of the runners.
Yeah, I just know what he's going to throw before. I don't really have to move the glove much because it's always going to be spot on. So, and you don't really have to worry about him. I don't have to make many mound visits because I always know he's going to be fine.
Both of these Patriots dreamed of playing Division I baseball, but there are a few benchmarks that you have to hit to realize that dream as a pitcher and catcher before colleges take you seriously. For Nolan, it was increasing his velocity.
The coaches look for D1. The cutoff usually is like 87 to 88. I mean, by the end of my junior year, I wanted to hit 90, but at Minnesota, I hit 89. And in this spring, I've been up to 91. So, I mean, just trying to work it.
As for Griffin, college scouts are looking for catchers to play elite defense and to keep runners from stealing. A good pop time for a D1 prospect is about 1.95 seconds.
My pop time in the summer was 1.84. That was the best I had. So, it just kind of just developed when I got bigger, older. When I was younger, I was pretty slow. Wasn't as quick, so I just kind of had to work on it.
Don't have to worry about teams running against us. We don't have to worry about pass balls. And then he has a pretty good stick, too, to go along with it.
With elite measurables in hand, both Nolan and Griffin started scoping out their options to play college baseball. Burchell went to the Prep Baseball Report Camp in Minneapolis, which eventually led to a D1 offer from Minnesota. Griffin's recruiting path took him a little further east.
And I went to a tournament with our summer team in Notre Dame, and Central Michigan and Western Michigan called me after that tournament, and then I visited Central Michigan. I just knew it was the place.
For as good as these 2 are in the field, it's easy to forget that they're also the meat of this order. They own the top 2 batting averages on the team and have produced 31% of the team's RBIs. But these 2 aren't worried about numbers or accolades. But there is a team goal for this tandem, and that's to lead Lincoln back to a championship.
Well, that's the goal. It'd be awesome because obviously we did it 2 years ago. We thought we were right there last year. I think we have a great group of senior guys here and underclassmen that are playing really well. So I think it'd just be awesome if we could get it done.
Without question, Jason, a couple of very talented young men, and their numbers certainly reflect that.
Yeah, we alluded to how good they are on the field and at the plate, but these numbers definitely back it up. Look at Griffin Aquid-Powell hitting .559 through the first 18 games of the year with 4 homers. That's 4 more homers than the rest of his team combined. Nolan Birchall on the hill, nearly flawless, over a K per inning, under a hit and walk per inning. Just outrageous numbers from these two, and they're a good reason why they are the favorites to win it in Class A.
Yeah, I really look forward to seeing what they could do to help the Patriots in the postseason. Well, speaking of the postseason, the first pitches have already been tossed for some of the region's high school baseball teams, but that's not going to stop us from giving you a full playoff preview. That's coming up next on Varsity Sports.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Mitchell Technical Institute, Shields, and Farmers Union Insurance Agency.
Well, it is playoff time for South Dakota high school baseball teams. Class B already underway, while Class A is set to get things started a little later this week. We're going to preview the postseason for you here in just a bit. But first, Jason, let's take a quick look at the final edition of this season's power rankings in Class A. Brookings and Lincoln, of course, remain the favorites, but who else do you say is carrying some momentum into the postseason?
You're right. This is our final regular season look. Lincoln slotted into that number 1 spot. Brookings lost a couple games down the stretch, get bumped to number 2, but definitely favorites. But your question, who is kind of gaining momentum? I think that's Sioux Falls Roosevelt. They've won 5 out of their last 7 now. End the season 13-8, but I think their pitching is really coming together at the right time.
Pierre, Brandon Valley, you got Mitchell in consideration, Aberdeen. Yeah. There's a bunch of teams that could end up playing in the state tournament here.
Yeah, when we look at the state tournament, I mean, there are good teams throughout those 4 regions, but these are my top 5 if you were to slate everybody together.
All right, how about Class B? Winter Cologne made it through undefeated through the regular season. These teams, of course, already play it a little bit, but let's take a look at your top 5 as it sits today.
As it sits today, you've got Winter Cologne at that number 1 spot. Can't argue with an undefeated record. And Reed Harder already pitched the first round of the playoffs for them. A no-hitter with 13 strikeouts. That's a good way to start the playoffs for Winter Cologne. St. Thomas More, so you got 2 teams right in Region 4 at the top of this one. And then Del Rapids, Sioux Falls Christian, and I think West Central, a team to watch that belongs in this top 5. But don't look down on a Dakota Valley, a Bonham, and even a Parkston Ethan, who gave Bonham everything that they could handle in the regular season.
Well, we're talking about Class B, so let's go right into that playoff preview. As we mentioned, these guys already underway, a few games already in the books, and moving on to the next round. What's, if anything, stands out to this point for you?
Yeah, let's look at Region 1 to get things started. And this is kind of a super regional format where after they get through to the final 4 in your region, everybody plays in the same spot. In Region 1, they're going to be playing in Dakota Valley, the top seed in Region 1. And there's a couple really good teams in this one. Bonham, Scotland, taking on Wagner actually tonight as we speak. I'm sorry, not Wagner, but Parks and Ethan as we speak. One of those 2 teams will be a threat to Dakota Valley for this region. In Region 2, you look at Del Rapids Baltic. This is a team that's been good all season. Just 1 loss last year, brought the entire team back this year. Suffered a couple losses early, but they're playing their best ball coming at the right time, and they're going to have that home field advantage in their super regional. So Region 2, I look for Del Rapids, St. Mary, Baltic, all 3 of those schools co-op for this. In Region 4, you got to believe that Sioux Falls Christian, they're going to host this one out at Renner, is probably the favorite because they've got so much pitching. Spencer Coolwine, along with the rest of that Jackson Olson, so many aces. And this is a one-and-done format where sometimes you got to play 2 games in the same day. You need that pitching depth. Sioux Falls Christian has it, but don't look past West Central. This is a team that has quietly gotten 2 losses on the year, but they feel like when they put their best lineup on the field, they can play with anybody, and I happen to agree with them. So look forward to that West Central, Sioux Falls Christian possible rematch of last year's regional final to be a great one in Region 3. And then you look to Region 4, and this is where we might have the 2 best teams in the entire class.
Very possible.
Yep, St. Thomas More got off with a win in their first round. They're going to face Bennett County coming up next Wednesday, which sets up a potential rematch with winner Cologne. If you don't remember, last time these two teams played, it came down to the last of the 7th inning. Winner Cologne singled in a run to win by just 1 run. And hopefully we see the aces when these two teams are playing each other for that berth in the state tournament.
Could be a true toss-up, and it's a shame that both of them can't move on, but that's just the way it is. May the best man win,
Yes.
I guess, for lack of a better saying.
Those are your favorites, yep.
As we know, Class A is a little bit behind. They're going to get started later this week. Again, Lincoln and Brookings are the teams to beat. I think that's clear. But I know in our conversations that you've mentioned that you could easily see the same 4 at making it through to the state tournament as we saw last year.
I think your favorites are the teams that made it last year. Yankton might give some trouble. Sioux Falls Roosevelt, one of those teams, could cause some, a little bit of something against Mitchell, who has to play on the road. But I think you look at Mitchell, Pierre, Brookings, and Lincoln as definite favorites to get back to the state tournament.
If you had to pick one team that isn't in that group, who would it be?
I think Roosevelt's hitting their stride at the right time, and I think their path to the state tournament might be the most attainable of somebody outside that top 4 for me.
All right, moving into North Dakota, let's go back to the power rankings now. These guys, of course, about a week behind. They're going to get started a little bit later on. Dickinson has been at number 1 for quite some time now in the power rankings, and there they are again.
Well, Century's very close. They're right on the heels of Dickinson right now. Dalton Feeney records another perfect game, his 2nd of the season, last Friday against Williston. So I think they're a definite contender when they get into a one-and-done format. They've got the pitching to do that, so look for them. Bismarck dropped a couple against Dickinson. They have a couple against Dickinson again for a rematch this week. So, again, I think those 3 teams are the teams we're talking about as the cream of the crop in Class A.
Regions for Class A coming up May 26th through the 28th. They'll be the 21st through the 26th in Class B, where Beulah, at least right now, is holding on to that number 1
Yeah, I
spot.
think Beulah deserves to be the number 1 team. I had a little switch with Carrington, just 1 loss on the year, bumping up to that number 2 spot. They have the experience. They made it all the way to state last year, the state championship game, and I think they've got what it takes to maybe make that move again this year.
Excited to see what the postseason holds for high school baseball in North and South Dakota. Well, the actual forecast looks pretty comfortable, and that bodes well for playoff baseball. The rest of the region's spring sports schedule, we're going to take a closer look at what's on tap when we come back.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Mitchell Technical Institute, Shields, and Farmers Union Insurance Agency.
Well, it finally feels like spring again, and of course, that's great news for our weekly planner.
The weekly planner jam-packed with a lot of important games. You see, toward the end of the week, some really close battles in Class A baseball. Of course, they got to win 2 games to get to state. Ton of state qualifiers. It's going to be another fun week, Jay.
It absolutely is. All right, that is our time for this week. For Alex Heinert, Jason Andera, I am JL, so we'll see you back here for another edition of Varsity Sports next Wednesday night.